I watched my wife's face drain of color as 500 phones buzzed simultaneously in a New Orleans ballroom. She was mid-sentence at the podium, delivering remarks about my generous archive donation, when the evidence arrived. Dr. Helena Marchant, chair of the Tulane Trust Board, stood abruptly and locked eyes with me across the room. Her expression wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition. The emails I'd scheduled contained surveillance footage timestamped November 18, 2025. Shows her son and his attorney inside a restricted vault I was supposed to control. They were photographing my father's original documents beside forged versions. My wife had no idea I knew. She'd spent 8 months building a competency case to bury me in legal paperwork while I was still breathing. She thought I was too old, too trusting, too devoted to notice. But I'm a historian. I spent 40 years teaching students how to detect forgery, how to verify provenance, how to tell the difference between original scholarship and theft. She made one critical mistake. She forgot that archivists document everything. And when your 14-year-old stepdaughter hands you recordings of her own mother planning your erasure, you learn very quickly that family loyalty has limits. The ballroom went silent, except for the Mississippi River traffic outside. I'd won. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like finally being able to breathe. But let me start 6 months earlier, when I first held the pen above a document that would have signed away everything I'd built. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, leave a comment for me. What are you doing while you listen? Driving, cooking, working, or just taking a moment? I truly appreciate you being here. Quick note, some details have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling. What matters most is the lesson this story carries. I held the pen 6 inches above the signature line and understood, with perfect clarity, that my wife was trying to bury me while I was still breathing. The chandelier cast warm light across our dining table. My wife, Marlene, 50 years old and director of the Louisiana Heritage Fund, smiled at me with the practiced grace she showed donors. 20 minutes earlier, she'd raised her crystal glass in a toast to Vernon, 70 years of brilliance and a legacy that will outlive us all. Outlive us all. Strange choice of words for a celebration. Corbin Whitfield, 32, and dressed in a suit that telegraphed ambition, glanced at his phone for the 3rd time during grace. My stepson from Marlene's first marriage, now a trust fund coordinator who'd spent 8 years calling me Dad. He sat close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixing with the roasted duck. From the hallway entrance, Corbin's 14-year-old daughter Iris hovered with her phone, pretending to scroll while her eyes tracked the adults. She watched everything and said little. Before dessert, Corbin said, setting down his fork, "There's just one administrative matter. Health clearance for the Gala. Insurance." Marlene placed the folder in front of me. "Just a formality, darling. The university requires proof you're of sound mind for the donation ceremony." Sound mind. I opened the folder slowly, using the methodical approach that had authenticated countless historical documents. Louisiana Mental Capacity Assessment. Durable Power of Attorney. Oakwood Senior Care Pre-Admission Forms. Not medical clearance. Incompetency paperwork. The capacity assessment was dated for next week. The power of attorney granted Marlene and Corbin joint authority over my estate if I was deemed unable to manage my affairs. The nursing home forms listed an admission window of July 5th through 15th, 3 days after the gala celebrating my $28 million archive donation to Tulane. "I'll need my reading glasses," I said, voice steady. "These documents require careful review." How long does it take to realize the people sitting across from you have been practicing this moment for months? That every concerned question about my memory, every suggestion that I seemed tired, every time Marlene finished my sentences, was building toward this folder that would erase me legally before I died physically. I reached for the Mont Blanc pen she'd placed beside the papers, my retirement gift from the university. "Vernon, darling," Marlene said softly. I know this feels invasive, but we just want to make sure you're protected. You've been so forgetful lately. I looked up at her. Really looked. The same face I'd woken beside for 8 years. The same woman who'd told me she married me for my mind. Who'd said she wanted to help preserve my legacy. 70 years of reading archival documents. And I'd never studied anything as carefully as the face of the woman I married. I saw the performance now. The tension around her mouth waiting for the correct response. Corbin's phone buzzed. His screen angled just enough for me to see the message preview. Confirmed. Signature tonight. Proceed with morning filing. From Attorney Broussard, the estate lawyer whose name appeared on 3 of these forms. Morning filing. They'd already scheduled the next step. They weren't asking me to sign. They were expecting it. In the hallway. Iris's phone screen illuminated her face. Her eyes moved from the papers to my face, to her father's phone, to her grandmother's smile. She whispered something so quietly, I almost missed it. Grandpa Vernon. I set down the pen without signing. Corbin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Marlene's smile held, but her fingers pressed white against her wine glass. In the hallway. Iris's phone screen glowed as she backed silently into the shadows. The question wasn't whether I'd sign. The question was whether anyone in this room understood I'd just stopped performing the role of the confused old man they'd been writing for me. I excused myself from the table 20 minutes after refusing to sign, citing exhaustion. By dawn, I was locked in my second-floor library with the lights off, waiting. The third signature on the donation amendment was mine, except I'd never signed it. I'd spread archive inventory ledgers across my oak desk as the sun rose. Donate contracts, university correspondence, personal catalogs spanning 40 years. The room smelled of old leather and the coffee I'd made at 5:30. My hands moved through the documents with practiced precision. 70 years of archival training. I knew my own handwriting. Footsteps paused outside my door around 7. Marlene's distinctive hesitation, waiting to see if I'd invite her in. Vernon? Her voice came softly through the door. Are you feeling well? Just reviewing some materials for the gala, I said. I'll be down for lunch. The footsteps retreated. I returned to the documents. The changes were subtle, requiring cross-referencing original contracts with digital copies filed at Tulane. Someone had altered collection descriptions, shifting royalty distribution from my sole control to joint estate authority. My Civil War correspondence collection, specifically attributed to my research, now read Louisiana Regional History, which, under state law, would include spousal claims. The annotations were worse. Notes I'd written in March 2024 about donor restrictions now showed dates of February 2025. I'd been at a conference in Austin that entire month. The handwriting looked like mine, but the ink was wrong, the pressure too uniform. Digital forgeries printed and rescanned. Who has access to the university digital archives? I asked the empty room. How many nights had I slept soundly while someone used my unconscious hand to rewrite my life's work? I dialed the only person I trusted with this question. Priscilla Lancaster answered on the second ring. Dr. Caldwell. Her voice carried the same precision I remembered from her doctoral defense 15 years ago. At 40, she was now head archivist at Tulane. The student who'd once helped me authenticate a disputed Jefferson letter, now managing the collection that bore my name. It's 6:45 on a Sunday morning. I need you to check something in the digital archive. Document timestamps, remote access logs. Computer keys clicked. What am I looking for? My credentials. Any access between October and March. Silence. More keystrokes. Then her voice changed. Dr. Caldwell, these timestamps show access at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Were you working those hours? I've never accessed the archive remotely. I don't know the login protocols. More silence. I could hear her breathing, the pattern she'd had when finding something wrong. The first alteration occurred October 15, 2025, she said carefully. Does that date mean anything to you? October 15th. I closed my eyes. Mylene had brought home new sleep medication that week. From Dr. Hébert, she'd said, because I'd been having trouble resting. The amber prescription bottle. The pills that made me sleep deeply, dreamlessly, waking groggy. I thought of every morning I'd woken, grateful for Marlene's concern about my rest. For the water glass she'd left on my nightstand. For her gentle questions about whether I'd slept well. Dr. Caldwell. Priscilla's voice pulled me back. If someone had your credentials and kept you heavily sedated, October to March is 5 months of access. I need to show you something at the archive. The security footage. I stood and walked to the library door, opening it slightly. Across the hall, through the open bedroom door, I could see Marlene's nightstand. The amber pill bottle sat beside her reading lamp, catching the morning light. My name on the label. Dr. Hébert's signature. Refilled monthly since October. I'll be there this afternoon, I said. By then, I'd be watching exactly who had walked into my archive while I slept. By afternoon, I was standing in the climate-controlled vault at Tulane Special Collections, staring at 2 documents projected side by side on Priscilla's screen. The document on the left was mine. The one on the right was a forgery so precise it had fooled a university board for 4 months. Left side, Priscilla said, her voice carrying the same careful precision she'd used defending her dissertation 15 years ago. Your original May 2025 submission. Right side, the version currently in university possession. Note the co-trustee clause. The vault smelled of preservation chemicals and filtered air. I leaned closer to the screen, my hand steady on the desk edge. The original document granted sole authority over the archive to me, with transfer to Tulane upon my death. The altered version included joint estate control with health-based authority provisions. Allows my spouse to assume management if I was deemed incapacitated. That signature is dated August 12th, I said. I was in Oxford presenting at a symposium. I know, Priscilla said quietly. I helped you prepare that presentation. The forgeries weren't amateur work. Someone had studied my signature patterns. The slight leftward slant I'd developed after a wrist injury in 1998. The way I crossed my T's with a descending stroke. But they'd missed the pressure variations, the places where decades of fountain pen use had trained my hand to lift slightly. How many documents? I asked. 12, all submitted between October and March. All dated during periods when university records show you were traveling. I had spent 40 years teaching students to recognize forgery in historical documents, never imagining I'd need to identify it in my own signature. Priscilla opened another window on her screen. Security footage. Grainy, but clear enough. A timestamp in the corner read November 18th, 2025, 3:47 a.m. Your credentials accessed the system remotely 20 minutes earlier, she said, pointing at the screen. Then this. 2 men entered the frame. The first I recognized immediately by his gait, the way he checked his phone even while walking. Corbin. The second was older, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He carried a leather briefcase with visible monogramming. That's Corbin, I said. And the man in the suit, Raymond Broussard, estate attorney. Louisiana bar number visible on his briefcase tag. I watched the footage play. Corbin used a key card to access the restricted vault. The same credentials that should have been mine alone. Inside, they photographed original documents with professional equipment, replaced files in the archival boxes. Spent 43 minutes working with the methodical efficiency of people who'd planned every movement. The timestamp showed I'd been in Atlanta that week, presenting at a conference on Civil War documentation. I remembered the hotel, the panel discussions, the morning I'd woken particularly groggy and assumed it was jet lag. November 18th, I said. That was 3 days into the Atlanta conference. Priscilla nodded. She'd already known. She'd been building the case without me asking, the way I'd taught her to authenticate disputed manuscripts by building evidence chains that couldn't be dismissed. She stood and walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of her office, returning with a cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. The seal bore an impression I recognized immediately. "Professor Delacroix left this with me in hospice," she said. "April 2024. Said you'd know when the time came." I took the envelope carefully. The wax seal showed Marcus Delacroix's signet ring, the one they'd buried with him. The handwriting on the front was his. Still strong, despite the cancer that had been consuming him. To be opened only if those who contributed nothing attempt to rewrite Vernon's authorship. He knew what second marriages to younger partners could become, Priscilla said. He protected you before you knew you needed it. Delacroix had been gone 18 months, but his final lesson was playing out with the precision of his best lectures. I turned the envelope over. The seal was intact, untouched since he'd pressed his ring into the wax, knowing he wouldn't live to see it opened. Whatever was inside had been crafted by a man who understood legacy theft better than anyone I'd ever known. I needed somewhere safe to open it, somewhere Marlene couldn't watch my reaction. I left Tulane with Delacroix's envelope in my briefcase and drove straight back to the estate. By 4 o'clock, I was standing in the master bedroom telling Marlene I needed 3 days alone at the lake to prepare my mind for the gala, and she believed me because she'd spent 8 years learning I was easy to lie to. "The gala will be my last public appearance as the collection's author," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need to center myself." Marlene looked up from her phone, concern flickering across her face with practiced precision. "You seem tired, darling. Perhaps I should come with you. Make sure you're resting properly." "I'll be back the morning of the event. This is something I need to do alone." She accepted with visible relief. I packed lightly, taking only the clothes I'd need and the envelope hidden in my briefcase. She watched me load the car, her hand raised in a gentle wave as I pulled out of the drive. In the rearview mirror, she was already texting someone. The drive west toward Breaux Bridge took me through Louisiana backroads I'd known for 40 years. Highway 90 cut through the Atchafalaya Basin, cypress trees rising from dark water like monuments to patience. I drove with the windows down, humid air carrying the scent of wetlands and the promise of rain. 8 years of small dismissals played through my mind with the clarity of archived footage. Every time Marlene finished my sentences at dinner parties, laughing about how we'd become one mind. Every time Corbin managed my appointments, saying he was just trying to lighten my load. Every time I disagreed with a decision and was told I seemed forgetful, confused, not quite myself. Every time she said I looked tired, she was writing the script for my incompetence. How many scholars have I eulogized, only to watch their families rewrite them into saints or monsters, depending on what served the inheritance. They didn't want the money. The archive was worth millions. Yes, but that wasn't the prize. They wanted the right to tell people who I was after I was gone, to curate my legacy, edit my letters, decide which parts of my work deserved preservation and which deserved footnotes explaining my declining mental state. Delacroix understood. Historians don't fear death. We fear being misquoted. Before I tell you what Delacroix left inside that envelope, I need to ask, if you discovered someone was rewriting your life story, would you stay silent or fight back? Drop A or B in the comments with one reason why. A quick note. Some details ahead are fictionalized to convey the deeper truth. What matters is the lesson. The sun was setting as I reached the cottage at Lake Martin, cypress shadows stretching across the water like fingers reaching for the far shore. The small structure sat exactly as I'd left it last autumn. Weathered wood and a porch that overlooked the lake. 2 hours from the estate. 2 hours from Marlene's watchful concern. 2 hours from the performance I'd been giving without realizing I was on stage. Here, I could finally stop pretending to be confused. I carried my bag and the briefcase inside. The cottage smelled of cedar and closed spaces. I set the envelope on the oak table by the window and stood watching egrets glide across the darkening water, their wings catching the last gold of sunset. The lake held the last light, like a mirror refusing to lie about what it reflected. 36 hours until the gala. Whatever was inside this envelope would decide if I walked into that ballroom as their victim or their reckoning. I placed my hand on the envelope's wax seal, feeling the impression of Delacroix's ring, the one they'd buried with him, the one he'd used one final time before death, knowing exactly what he was protecting me from. Whatever he'd written inside had been composed by a dying man who knew exactly how legacy thieves operated. Tomorrow night, I'd either be their victim at the gala, or I'd be the historian who documented his own vindication. The seal broke with a sound like a promise kept. Delacroix's handwriting hadn't wavered even in hospice. The letter was dated April 2024, 3 weeks before his death, and it began with words that turned the cottage air cold. Vernon, if you're reading this, they've started erasing you while you're still alive. I sat at the cottage's kitchen table under lamplight, the lake dark beyond the window. His letter continued in the precise script I'd known for 40 years, explaining how he'd observed Marlene's calculated positioning during their last faculty dinner together in March 2024. The way she'd steered conversations about my health, planted seeds about my forgetfulness, positioned herself as the devoted younger wife, managing an aging scholar's decline. I've seen 3 colleagues erased this way, he'd written. The pattern is identical. New spouse, concern about health, gradual isolation. Then the paperwork. Enclosed with the letter were 3 documents. Pre-drafted legal notifications to Dr. Helena Marchant, chair of the Tulane Trust Board. To my publisher at Louisiana Historical Press. To the Louisiana Bar Association Ethics Committee. Each letter documented competency fraud patterns with the precision of a man who'd spent 60 years evaluating historical evidence. They only needed my signature and a send timestamp. Historians defend the dead's reputations, the letter concluded. I'm returning the favor while you're still breathing. He'd died knowing what was coming for me and built the counterstrike I'd need. I was reading the letters for the 3rd time when my phone buzzed. An encrypted message from a number I didn't recognize, but the preview text told me everything. Grandpa V, I'm sorry. I recorded this tonight. They don't know I know. Iris. I opened the attachment with hands that had steadied after 70 years of practice. Her voice came through first, whispered. I'm in the upstairs hallway. They're in the study, recording now. Then Marlene's voice, clear and unbothered. After the gala, when he's exhausted, Dr. Hebert will recommend immediate evaluation. By Friday, he'll be settled at Oakwood. Corbin's laugh. And the trust transfer executes Monday. Clean, compassionate, legally airtight. The gala speech will be perfect, Marlene continued. His last coherent public moment, surrounded by people who love him. Then we help him rest. Iris was 14 years old and had just handed me the evidence that would destroy her father's freedom and her grandmother's reputation. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 locations, and opened my laptop. The cottage's Wi-Fi was slow, but sufficient. I pulled up Priscilla's forensic evidence from the archive investigation, the security footage showing Corbin and Broussard entering the restricted vault, the timestamp analysis proving the alterations occurred while I was sedated. I signed Delacroix's 3 letters with my fountain pen, the same one I'd used to sign the original archive donation papers before they were forged. I scanned each signature, attached Priscilla's evidence packets, added Iris's audio file with a timestamp verification. The email system let me schedule simultaneous delivery. I set all 3 messages for July 1st. 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes into the gala reception. Exactly when Marlene's event coordinator had scheduled her tribute speech about my generous legacy and necessary transition. Evidence of competency fraud and legacy theft. Vernon Caldwell Archive. I typed in the subject line, tomorrow night, while she speaks about my declining mind. 30 witnesses will receive proof of hers. The send button glowed blue on the screen. 18 hours until detonation. I clicked it. The system confirmed 3 messages queued for delayed delivery. Recipients would receive them simultaneously. No recall possible once the timer started. Thank you for teaching me that the best defense of truth is meticulous documentation, I said to the empty cottage, to Delacroix's memory, to the man who'd protected me from the grave. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Across the dark water, a single light burned on the far shore. Someone else awake at midnight, fighting their own invisible war. Tomorrow, I'd return to the estate, playing the grateful, tired scholar one final time. Tomorrow night, in a ballroom full of Louisiana's academic elite, I'd stop playing anything at all. The gala would begin with champagne and end with depositions. The Roosevelt Hotel's grand ballroom smelled like old money and fresh lilies. I arrived at 7:15 p.m. wearing my only decent suit and the careful mask of a grateful donor who didn't know his wife planned to bury him in legal paperwork by morning. Delacroix's timed emails sat in digital suspension, scheduled to detonate in exactly 30 minutes. Dr. Helena Marchant, 62-year-old chair of the Tulane Archive Trust Board and former Dean of Humanities, greeted me with the careful warmth reserved for generous but fragile donors. Mr. Caldwell, we're honored. Your archive will serve researchers for generations. The honor's mine, I said, shaking her hand while watching Marlene work the room like she owned it. She did, in every way that mattered to these people. Perfect posture, perfect laugh, perfect performance of the devoted wife managing her declining husband's final philanthropic gesture. Priscilla had positioned herself near the presentation screen, phone in hand, ready to coordinate if anything went wrong with the digital delivery. She caught my eye and tapped her watch. 28 minutes. Event 1 complete. The trap was set. Your father's work on Reconstruction-era Louisiana was foundational, Dr. Marchant continued. We've already received inquiries from 3 doctoral candidates. He'd be proud. The words tasted like ash. My father had spent 40 years building that archive. Now it would serve as Exhibit A in my competency defense. Corbin arrived fashionably late, making his entrance with the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. I watched him intercept board member after board member, leaning in with concerned expressions, playing seeds with surgical precision, naturally worried about Vernon's recent confusion, difficult decisions. But Marlene's handling it with such grace. Family's priority is protecting his legacy while ensuring proper care. Each phrase calibrated, each word weaponized. I was a historian at my own funeral, watching them compose the eulogy that would explain why I'd lost my mind. By 7:30 p.m., Corbin's narrative had metastasized through the room. I caught fragments of sympathetic whispers, saw the subtle shift in how donors approached me slower, louder, with the careful enunciation reserved for children and the impaired. Even Dr. Marchant's eyes had changed, softening with something that looked dangerously like pity. That was Corbin's gift. He didn't just lie. He made truth irrelevant. Marlene found me near the hors d'oeuvres table, touching my arm with practiced concern. Darling, you look tired. Should we? I'm fine. I checked my watch. 14 minutes. She squeezed my hand, playing the devoted wife for the trustees clustered nearby. The presentation starts soon. Doctor. Marchant wants you in the front row when I speak. Of course she did. Front row seat to my own erasure. 7:44 p.m. 60 seconds. Marlene approached the podium with the confidence of someone delivering a eulogy for a man still breathing. The room quieted. Priscilla's hand hovered over her phone. I counted heartbeats. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Caldwell family, I want to express our profound gratitude. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound rippled through the ballroom like a wave. Dr. Marchant's phone. 3 board members simultaneously reaching into pockets. University counsel checking his screen mid-conversation. Delacroix's emails had arrived exactly on schedule. I watched Dr. Marchant's face as she opened the message. Confusion first, then focus, then something harder, crystallizing behind her academic composure. She wasn't reading a rambling complaint from a confused old man. She was reading documentation, evidence, timeline, legal analysis. She was reading proof. Marlene's voice faltered mid-sentence as Dr. Marchant stood abruptly, phone in hand, and locked eyes with me across the ballroom. The board chair's expression wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition. She knew. They all knew. The ballroom screen flashed to life with security footage time-stamped November 18, 2025, 3:47 a.m. Shows Corbin Whitfield and attorney Raymond Broussard inside the restricted two-lane vault that only I was supposed to access. Priscilla had moved to the projection controls. Split screen left showed the original May 2025 donation contract. Right showed the current university file. Same document, different signature date. Altered copyright clauses. Left original May 2025 donation contract. Priscilla's voice carried across the silenced ballroom. Right current university file. Note signature. Date August 12th. Dr. Caldwell's passport shows UK entry that day. I had been presenting at Oxford that entire week. The evidence was time-stamped, geotagged, irrefutable. Dr. Marchant turned to Corbin. You accessed the archive using Vernon's credentials while he was out of the country. Corbin backed toward the exit, hands raised. This is a misunderstanding. Those are standard estate planning adjustments. Forgery, I said quietly. The microphone caught it anyway. The next clip showed Broussard photographing original documents while Corbin kept watch. Split screen again. Original annotations in my father's handwriting beside altered versions now in university possession. They'd rewritten history. Betting I'd be declared incompetent before anyone verified provenance. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with something acrid, fear. Maybe, or lies decomposing in public. I walked to the podium where Marlene had planned to deliver my eulogy. The letter in my hand was 3 pages. Cream stationery, her distinctive handwriting. March 2018, 3 months before our wedding. I had taught document authentication for 40 years. Now I was using those skills to authenticate my own betrayal. This is a letter my wife wrote to herself, I said. A planning document, March 14th, 2018. I began reading. Marrying Vernon isn't about love at 70. It's about authorship after he's gone. His archive will be mine to curate. His legacy, mine to define. Marlene's whisper carried from across the room. Vernon, please. I kept reading. The words were clinical, calculated. He's kind, brilliant, and most importantly, he trusts easily. The best subjects for legacy management always do. I had loved her. Past tense felt like swallowing glass. The letter detailed timelines, asset values, institutional connections she'd cultivate through my reputation. It described me the way a curator describes a collection valuable, manageable, soon to be archived. Dr. Marchant's expression shifted from shock to grief. She understood the difference between collaboration and appropriation. I folded the letter. My hands weren't shaking. The trust board votes to suspend all transfers and initiate forensic audit, Dr. Marchant said. Mr. Whitfield, you'll need to speak with University Counsel immediately. Corbin was already halfway to the exit. Security moved to intercept. Marlene approached me away from the microphone. Her performance collapsed. Are you destroying our family? Is this what you want? Public humiliation? The chandeliers still glittered above us, indifferent to the difference between a celebration and an execution. I looked at her, trying to find some trace of the woman I'd thought I married. I'm not destroying anything, Marlene. I'm stopping you from burying me in footnotes written by people who never loved the work. She flinched. Marlene's face drained of color as security approached Corbin. And doctor, Marchant formally requested I join the board in a private room to discuss next steps. The gala guests stood frozen, champagne glasses forgotten, watching Louisiana academic history rewrite itself in real time. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers. The law office was silent, except for the Mississippi River traffic below. And I realized this was what victory looked like when you'd won by proving the people you loved had tried to bury you. Tomorrow had arrived. Thomas Guidry, my estate attorney and former law school classmate, had prepared the settlement documents with the same meticulous precision I used in archival work. He slid the first folder across the table to Ellen Roussel, the criminal defense attorney Marlene retained overnight, who looked exhausted from reviewing evidence that offered no viable defense. Marlene sat perfectly still. Corbin shifted like a man calculating exit routes. Given last night's evidence, my client is prepared to forego criminal prosecution if these terms are accepted immediately, Thomas said. Ellen scanned the documents. Mrs. Caldwell, I must advise that your legal exposure is significant. The archive footage alone constitutes— Just tell me what I'm signing away, Marlene interrupted. I'd already moved everything. The archive was under independent board control. The royalty fund was separate from marital property. They'd had access to nothing real for weeks, just paperwork designed to keep them confident while I built walls they couldn't see. Thomas enumerated the terms. Immediate dissolution of marriage, complete relinquishment of all archive claims, surrender of estate co-management rights, acknowledgement that criminal fraud investigation remains open pending compliance. Corbin leaned forward. This leaves us with nothing. It leaves you without prosecution, Thomas corrected. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. I hadn't touched it. The next folder wasn't about punishment. The Iris Whitfield Educational Trust funds her education through graduate school, administered solely by Tulane Financial Aid, Thomas said, sliding documents toward Corbin. $500,000. Neither parent has access or control. 40 years of marriage and 8 years of this one. And I'd finally learned the difference between love and performance. Corbin stared at the documents. You're giving my daughter $500,000 while cutting us out completely. I'm ensuring one member of your family has a future that wasn't built on fraud, I said. Marlene's eyes met mine for the first time that morning. Something moved behind them. Surprise? Maybe. Or calculation. Iris had handed me her mother's letter, had recorded conversations that proved competency, when Corbin's narrative could have destroyed me. She'd chosen truth over family loyalty at 14. That deserved more than being collateral damage. Thomas walked them through the remaining provisions. Living expenses, books, housing through doctoral completion if she pursued it. Iris would receive notification directly. Her parents' signatures acknowledged they relinquished any claim to contest. Ellen reviewed everything twice, looking for angles that didn't exist. She advised them to sign. The river outside kept flowing, indifferent to who owned what on its banks. Pens moved across signature lines. Marlene's hand was steady. Corbin's hesitated in the trust acknowledgement before finishing with a flourish that looked obscene. They stood to leave. Corbin paused at the door. Why protect her? He asked. After what why give Iris anything? Because she's 14 and recorded evidence that saved my life, I said. She chose truth over family loyalty. That deserves a future. Marlene turned back, her voice quiet. You really aren't who I thought you were. I know, I said. That was the problem. They walked out of the office into a New Orleans morning that looked the same as yesterday, but would never feel the same again. I sat alone at the conference table for several minutes after they left, watching the river and understanding that winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like finally being able to breathe. The October morning arrived quietly at the Lake Martin cottage, and I made coffee in a kitchen where no one was waiting to hand me documents that would erase me. 3 months since the settlement. The breathing had gotten easier, My memoir manuscript sat on the desk, 272 pages, titled The Archivist's Defense, a memoir of truth and legacy theft. I'd finished it in September, working through dawn hours when the egrets fished the shallows. No medication bottles, no performance required, just coffee, silence, and honest documentation. 3 months since the gala, I said to the empty kitchen. The university kept the archive. I kept my authorship. Some mornings I still expected Marlene's footsteps. Then I remembered I chose the silence. The mailman delivered 2 items, an official 2-lane envelope and a handwritten letter postmarked Metairie. The notice confirmed the Iris Whitfield Educational Trust had awarded its first disbursement. Tuition, books, housing, the machinery of earned future clicking into motion. Iris's letter was 3 pages, blue ink, careful cursive. Dr. Caldwell, my history teacher assigned an essay on primary source integrity. I wrote about you, got an A. I was 70 years old and finally understood that legacy isn't what you leave, it's what you refuse to let others take. She'd analyzed how historians verify authenticity, how forgery attempts reveal the forger's motives. Her teacher asked if the story was real. Iris told her to search New Orleans news from July 2026. Dad won't speak to me since the trial, she wrote. Mom says I betrayed family, but you taught me family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your values. 14 years old, and she understood what most scholars never learn, that protecting truth costs something. She signed it, Your Student in Truth-Telling, Iris. I folded the letter and set it beside the memoir manuscript. 2 kinds of documentation. 2 ways of refusing erasure. Priscilla's car appeared around 2, dust trailing behind. She'd driven from New Orleans with news she insisted on delivering in person. The collection is protected, Dr. Caldwell, she said from the porch rocker. Your name, your work, your terms. It's done, not done, I corrected. Corrected. There's a difference between winning and simply refusing to be erased. She handed me the final archival inventory. Every forged document removed and destroyed. New security protocols installed. The Caldwell archive cataloged under my sole authorship. My father's work, preserved as intended. Corbin had accepted a plea agreement, community service, restitution, professional censure. No prison. Marlene moved to Houston, took a position with a small foundation that didn't ask questions. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just quiet relief that they couldn't reach me anymore. The egrets knew something about survival. You don't fight every current. You just refuse to drown in someone else's version of the water. We watched afternoon light shift across the cypress. Priscilla asked if I was lonely. I told her loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing. One is imposed. The other is chosen. She left before sunset. I stood on the cottage porch as October light turned the cypress gold, holding my completed memoir in one hand and Iris's letter in the other. 3 months ago, I'd sat at a dinner table surrounded by family, plotting to bury me. Now I stood alone, and the solitude felt like armor I'd forged myself. Some victories don't come with applause. They come with the quiet knowledge that you chose truth over comfort and lived to write your own last chapter. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Protecting your legacy isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to be erased from your own narrative. I made a mistake that nearly cost me everything. I trusted without verifying. I assumed love meant loyalty. I was so grateful for companionship after years of loneliness that I ignored the warning signs. The medication bottles that appeared without explanation, the documents with altered dates, the careful questions about my memory. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts, especially when people close to you start treating you like you're already gone. What I learned from this drama family betrayal is that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you refuse to let others steal. While you're still here, This wasn't just a revenge story about exposing fraud. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. I believe God allowed this trial to teach me that silence isn't always wisdom. Sometimes, documenting truth and standing your ground is the most faithful response. The truth doesn't always come with applause, but it comes with peace. And peace is worth more than any archive. If this revenge story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment. Have you ever had to stand up to family? What would you have done differently? Please share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more drama family stories about truth, legacy, and standing your ground, subscribe to my channel. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. A final reminder, certain details in this story have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling purposes. What remains unchanged is the lesson about protecting what's yours.